Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Hey there, a big welcome into the GSMC Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Lucas Moore, and it's a big day in baseball, which is weird in the month of January. Almost said February. Time is moving so fast. It's actually so cold in the middle of the country that you think time would slow down in my brain, but I think I'm trying to skip forward and get to the warmer weather. But it's a big day in baseball because the Hall of Fame selections have been announced. Of course, the great Yankee Derek Jeter in by not the skin of his teeth, nearly unanimous, as he made 99.7% of ballots, was left off one to not receive a unanimous vote. We'll get into that a little bit later in the show. Also, congratulations to Larry Walker, the slugger, formerly of the Colorado Rockies, and for a little bit for the St. Louis Cardinals. Both great players, both deserving Hall of Famers. Least amount of Hall of Famers we've had since 2016. I'm Lucas Moore. We're going to dive into all of that. Also, Luis Rojas named the new manager of the New York Mets after Carlos Beltran out because of the cheating scandal. Speaking of that cheating scandal, we'll dive into the Houston Astros and their response to the cheating scandal, how I didn't like it, what they have now responded to, the criticism from that lackluster apology by their star players. A lot of fun stuff to dive into. Also, it's Hall of Fame season, which means we need to talk about whether the two greatest players, if you ignore steroids, Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, whether they should be in the Hall of Fame, that debate and more, all that coming up on this podcast. Before we get started, follow us on Twitter at GSMC_baseball. That's where you're going to find new posts of the podcast. Rate, subscribe. Make sure you find us on all your favorite podcasting platforms. It's what we love to do here. It's share, make sure that you're getting all the information, and it helps us out a lot when you leave a review, especially a nice one. We really appreciate it. But where I wanted to start today's show is, and many people are doing this across sports, and it's deserving, because one of the most famous baseball players of all time is being honored. That guy is Derek Jeter, number 2, the captain, New York's hero, Mr. November, an incredible player, being honored all over baseball. And he's being honored for a multitude of things. His 5 championships, his incredible career from rookie year on, his unbelievable playoff run and playoff record. All these things are commendable. All these things are great. You'll even have some criticism of Derek Jeter that his numbers weren't exactly as impressive once you put him under the microscope of sabermetrics. He is, according to Baseball Reference, the least valuable, in terms of runs, least valuable middle infielder of all time. Almost double the next lowest guy. He's minus 200 runs for his career at the middle infield position. But I'm not going to dive into criticism of Derek Jeter today, because to me, he represents what makes baseball great. And this is a story that really connects to me. It connects to my background, how baseball showed itself to me and showed me that it is more than just a sport that's about how high you can jump, how fast you can run, how quickly you can move side to side. Baseball's about being a ball player. And some people say this is why they don't like baseball, because you can be a little overweight, a little slow, not as powerful or as strong, and still be a better ball player. But to me, that's the beauty of this game, is that all around the world, there are kids who are shorter, aren't as athletic, don't look explosive, who could never make it in football, who could never make it in soccer, who could never make it in basketball, who find their niche, who find their groove, who find the love of a game in baseball. Because baseball is so much more than just athleticism. Baseball is about smarts. Baseball is about predicting the next move. Baseball is chess on the run. Baseball is about grit and toughness and showing up the next day, showing up the next at-bat, showing up the next pitch, no matter what happened on the pitch, the at-bat, or the day before. This game is about resiliency. This game is about pressing through defeat. This game is about mistakes. And Derek Jeter, all he did throughout his career is represent what a true ball player is. Consistency, contact, dedication, work. All those things are what made Derek Jeter great. It wasn't his athleticism. Alex Rodriguez was much more athletic. It wasn't his power. There are shortstops across history with plenty more power than Derek Jeter. It wasn't that he elevated his performance in the playoffs. No, it's that he was consistent. Same stat line in his regular seasons as in the playoffs. He brought it every day. He showed up to work and did his job. And he did it with intelligence. And the reason this connects to me is because I wasn't the greatest athlete. I didn't move side to side very well. I wasn't a great straight line sprinter. But it didn't matter. Because I could play the game. I could be a ball player. And I think you guys have examples, dig into your memory banks of kids who don't look so great on the field. Their glove isn't very smooth. Their arm's not very strong. They don't hit for a lot of power. But at the end of the day, they're 2 for 4. They've got 3 RBIs. At the end of the day, they didn't strike out. At the end of the day, they did their job and they did it smartly. At the end of the day, they didn't make any mistakes. And those players are more valuable than your high-class athlete who makes a ton of mistakes. And that's what makes this game beautiful. And I think Derek Jeter is a beautiful representation of that. Not that he wasn't athletic, not that he didn't have a good arm, not that he didn't move quickly side to side. He wasn't the best at any of those things at any time in his career. He just kept showing up and he kept playing the game and playing it the right way. And this is what makes baseball beautiful, is that any type of kid can play. 5'4", little short. Well, if you're quick, little dedication, work on your arm, you can certainly be a shortstop. You can be an outfielder. You might even have an advantage if you play it smartly and have a batting stance. You might have a smaller strike zone. Are you big, tall, and strong, but you're lumbering and don't move very well? Well, we have a position for you. It's called first base. Or even on the mound. All you need to play baseball and play it at a high level is A, a love of the game, B, a dedication to it, C, an understanding that if you figured out the mental aspects of this sport, if you figure out how to show up consistently, how to forget the last at-bat, the last strikeout, the last error, you can be a great ball player. A great ball player. And I emphasize this to coaches around the country, specifically high school coaches who get so enamored with speed and height and strength and raw power and the dudes that shake the cage and the dudes that heat your glove up when they throw. I emphasize to coaches all over the place, and I emphasize to people that are putting kids in certain positions. I say, don't look for those guys. Look for ball players. Now, your best case scenario is you have a hyper athlete who's also a great ball player. But I would rather a team of guys who understand the game, who embrace the mentality of it, who know how to have a good at-bat, who know how to not swing at pitches out of the zone, who don't get in their own head after a strikeout, who do all the right things, who do all the small things correctly. That's the type of players that coaches should want, that coaches should thrive on. And I promise you, if you empower a kid that's a little chubby, but man, he can hit for contact. Man, he doesn't look good, but he's second on the team in batting average. Man, his arm's not the best, but he doesn't have an error this year. I promise you, if you empower that kid, especially at a young age, he can turn into something special. Because if you show belief in him, you can improve athleticism. You can improve your arm. You can improve your power. You can get in the weight room. You can get in shape. But you can't become a ball player. That's inside. And Derek Jeter is in a class of players. There are many in Major League Baseball, and pretty much everybody in the Hall of Fame was a ball player. But he embodies it so much. I think like Pete Rose, hustle, effort, forgetting the last play, moving on to the next one, being a good leader and being consistent in the biggest moments, and loving to win. And I understand that most of these things I just said seem like cliches, but they are so true in this game. Ball players make it. Ball players belong on the field. And that's what separates baseball from everything else. And that's what separates Derek Jeter from some of the greatest middle infielders of all time, and why he'll always have a special place in my heart as a kid who's never been outside of the airport in New York City. Beautiful career from Derek Jeter. Much respect to him. So much fun to see him in the Hall of Fame. He's a ball player. And be a ball player is something special. On the other side of the break, we got to talk about Twitter for a second of this non-unanimous vote and whether Derek Jeter should have been unanimous or should not have been, and whether we should be going after people for this. That's on the other side. You're listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Big welcome back into the GSMC Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Lukas Moore. Follow us on Twitter at GSMC_baseball. And we just talked about Derek Jeter and how much of a ball player he is and how much I respect his game and the way he played it, with the attitude he played it with the leadership he played it with, and how every person ever should strive, that plays this game, should strive to play it like Derek Jeter did. And I think that's a beautiful message to send. Now, that does not mean I think he should have been a unanimous Hall of Famer. I mean, the guy had a lower career WAR, wins above replacement, than Larry Walker, the guy who just got in on the 10th year by 6 votes. That's the type of situation we're sitting in with Derek Jeter. He played 20 years, almost 1,000 more games than Larry Walker, yet by wins above replacement, which I trust was a less valuable player than Larry Walker. Now, Derek Jeter's postseason success, Derek Jeter's impact on the game, Derek Jeter's leadership ability, Derek Jeter's status, his moments, the ability to not tell, you can't tell the story of baseball without Derek Jeter. You certainly can without Larry Walker. And I get all that, and that is why Derek Jeter 1,000% belongs as a first ballot Hall of Famer. But am I going to run to Twitter and crucify the man who didn't vote him on the ballot this year to make Derek Jeter not unanimous? No. Mariano Rivera was unanimous. He's the greatest closer of all time. There's nobody better. Nobody better in big spots, nobody better in the regular season. There are plenty of shortstops that have been better than Derek Jeter. Plenty shortstops who've been better than Derek Jeter. You can even look at Alex Rodriguez's time with the Rangers. You can argue that he was a better shortstop in those moments than Derek Jeter was. We mentioned the defensive stats at the beginning of the show. Derek Jeter isn't necessarily an all-time defender. In fact, he's probably the opposite. He had some great flash plays, but Ozzie Smith was a much better defender. Barry Larkin was a much better defender at the shortstop position. And Derek Jeter, the postseason success is what carries it through, but he's not Ken Griffey Jr. either. And guess what? Ken Griffey Jr. wasn't a unanimous first ballot Hall of Famer. I just don't think that Derek Jeter necessarily deserves that. Would I have been mad if he would have gotten it? No, because I would have put him on my ballot. But I'm not going to go out on Twitter trying to find out who was the one guy that made sure Derek Jeter wasn't unanimous. And this is a comment on society as a whole. Twitter is probably just not the place we should do these things. Also, trying to find people because they disagreed with us is not something that I'm in support of whatsoever. Right? There are examples throughout Major League history of players who are certainly better than Derek Jeter. Offensively, defensively, impact, all those things, who were not unanimous first ballot Hall of Fame selections. And I love Derek Jeter, and he should be on the first ballot. But unanimous is not something that I think he 100% deserved and 100% earned. Now, if he would have gotten it again, it wouldn't have been mad. But I don't think we need to get mad and turn into this mob mentality of trying to find out who didn't vote Derek Jeter onto their Hall of Fame ballot. I'm just not in favor of that. I just wanted to comment on that. And then I wanted to move on to Larry Walker, because Larry Walker is a huge example of why Derek Jeter might not necessarily deserve to be unanimous, as the masses tend to think, as the masses tend to say, right? Larry Walker has an MVP award. Derek Jeter does not. Larry Walker had a higher batting average in 3 seasons than Derek Jeter had in any single season of his career. Larry Walker had a higher career wins above replacement than Derek Jeter. Now, as soon as you factor in the postseason, Derek Jeter starts to blow Larry Walker away. As soon as you start to factor in impact on the game, he starts to blow Larry Walker away. But Larry Walker played with the Colorado Rockies in Denver. And the Rockies right now can't handle their star player currently, Nolan Arenado. And it seems like they'll never get out of their own way to be able to get to/win World Series consistently. While the New York Yankees have been the New York Yankees. They're the greatest organization in sports, arguably. Now, I understand they didn't win a World Series this past decade, and that Derek Jeter was the captain of the team the last time they did it. But Larry Walker, you compare their careers, their impact on their teams, their wins above replacement, and Larry Walker isn't so different than Derek Jeter. And they're both Hall of Famers. They both should be in the Hall of Fame. But I wanted to remind you of how good Larry Walker was over his 770 career WAR, higher than Derek Jeter. Won an MVP award. Had a 369-plus batting average 3 times, won 3 NL batting titles. Dealt with some injuries throughout his career. But he hit nearly 400 home runs. He was an excellent baseball player and a deserved member of the Hall of Fame. And it's so cool he got in on the 10th ballot. So cool he got in on the 10th ballot. And if he wouldn't have made it in, and Derek Jeter would have, when you look at the numbers, it would have almost been a crime. So happy he got in on 10th. And I think that the sabermetrics are going to start putting guys in like Larry Walker, who you would have never thought should be put in. Larry Walker was dismissed because he played at Coors Field. When you look at the numbers deeper, it really didn't matter that much. It didn't help him that much, the high altitude. He was forgotten about because he was in Denver. He had injuries throughout his career. He played in an era where a lot of guys had inflated stats because of steroids. And we'll dive into that in just a second. But once we look through the lens of history and statistics and we're given these options to look at these statistics through sabermetrics, Larry Walker becomes a clear Hall of Famer and a deserved one. And I'll be honest, Larry Walker wasn't a guy that I could recall immediately. Now, once I saw his picture and his highlights, I was like, oh, yeah, that guy. I kind of remember him. And the fact that now I'm fully educated on him is amazing. That's what the Hall of Fame does. It educates you on players that weren't necessarily in your generation viewing. Right? Larry Walker was rolling at the end of his career in 2004 with the Cardinals when I started truly paying attention to baseball because I was at the age to pay attention to baseball. So he wasn't a guy I was horribly familiar with. But the Hall of Fame shows you guys that you might not have seen, especially from ages 15 to 25, right? Ages 15 to 30, guys you might not necessarily would have seen or heard of, and you start to see the whole picture of their career, and you start to gain an appreciation of these players. And that's why we have Hall of Fames. And I'm so happy Larry Walker found his way into that Hall of Fame. Should the Steroid Boys, that's my nickname for them, Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds, the two headliners, the two poster boys, the two most hotly debated characters in sports this time of year, Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens. Should they be in the Hall of Fame? I'll give my opinion next. You're listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
GSMC Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Lukas Moore. Big welcome back into the show. Follow us on Twitter at GSMC_baseball. Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens. If we had never found out about their steroids, I could come on this show and I could make a real argument that Barry Bonds is the greatest hitter of all time and Roger Clemens is the greatest pitcher of all time. Now, you get a little more pushback on the Roger Clemens thing, but I could sit here and make a real argument at that. A true argument for those two players to be the greatest at their positions of all time. But we understand that they use steroids. And frankly, a lot of people think quite a bit of them. They might have been the two largest perpetrators of the steroid era. They are the poster boys, the headliners of it. And that makes you nervous. That makes you question. That makes it a debate whether they should be included in the Hall of Fame as guys who cheated. And this is debate that's been spoke about tons. And it's deserved to be spoke about tons. It's a shame, though, that it's spoken about as much as it is, because we continue to have to bring up one of the darkest eras of baseball because of the reaction to it. Now, not necessarily the play within it. A lot of entertaining seasons in the steroid era. In fact, many would argue it was the height of baseball, when guys were hitting home runs all the time, runs were up, guys were big beasts in the box holding little sticks of wood and smacking it 490 feet without having to adjust the baseball, or rumors that the baseball was adjusted. So, but the court cases, the negativity after these events is what makes this such a dark era. But in my opinion, I think that nearly everybody was probably cheating. And I mentioned the Astros cheating scandal on the previous show. We'll dive into that a little bit more later in the show. And if you catch, and I said this, if you catch a third of an organization cheating, in my opinion, most of the time, you probably just haven't caught the other 2/3. And in baseball, the names that are accused of / have done steroids is a laundry list. It is a mile long. It is half the league, most of the minors. And when you have that in front of me, my argument is, well, then shouldn't all those players in that era be given the same opportunity to the Hall of Fame? Because they played in an era when everybody else was doing it, so they had to still perform at a high level while doing it, while everybody else was also doing it. And that's an argument that people who think steroids is cheating flatly just simply refuse, and I understand that. I completely understand that. If you think it's cheating and cheaters should be rewarded and they should be punished for life and not be allowed into the Hall of Fame, then fine. I can't really move you off that point. But we know baseball, right, is more than just strength. So a pitcher that throws really hard, and we've seen this at all levels, doesn't make him a great pitcher. Aroldis Chapman had a pretty high ERA early in his career as a flamethrower. Just because he threw hard and was strong didn't make him a great pitcher. He needed to add control, add an off-speed pitch, know how to pitch, know how to stay consistent, have the mentality to consistently pitch great. And we know that hitting is so much more than strength. So much more than strength. And being big and strong is only half the battle. Yeah, it helps you hit a little harder, but you have to make contact. You have to make contact on the sweet spot. You have to know what pitch is coming, anticipate it, understand how to have good at-bats, understand how to take a walk when it's necessary. There's so much more that goes into being a good or great hitter than strength. But even if we want to give steroids 50% of the credit for both Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens' career, which I think is extreme, I would say that steroids help these players around 5%, 10%. And honestly, I would even go 2%, but 5 or 10% is what I'll say. But I'll even give those of you the argument who are completely against steroids and say that steroids gave these guys 50% of their career, a whole 50% of their career, which that's a lot. So if we take away 50% of the career of Barry Bonds, here's what you have. You have a 4-time MVP winner, 4-time Gold Glove winner, 7-time All-Star, 6-time Silver Slugger, 1-time Major League Player of the Year, a batting title. You have a guy that hit nearly 400 home runs, batted .298 for his career, had almost 1,000 RBIs, and would have 81 wins above replacement. By far a better player than the guy who is nearly just unanimous, Derek Jeter. If you took 50% of Barry Bonds away, which again I think is extreme, I think that saying steroids adds 50% to a hitter is extreme. And I think thinking strength is that impactful towards hitting is just not true. I mean, I've seen big and strong guys fail all the time and be worse hitters than skinny, lanky guys. That's the beauty of baseball, right? Hitting is so much more than strength. And sure, it maybe helped him stay healthy, and you can add all these arguments, but I find it hard to believe that it adds up to taking away half of a career. But even if it does, Barry Bonds is a 3rd or 4th ballot Hall of Famer. Many would have him as 1st ballot still, if you gave me that resume. 4 MVPs, 6 Silver Sluggers, 7-time All-Star, nearly 400 home runs, over 1,000 RBIs. It's a Hall of Famer, people. Hall of Famer. Not greatest of all time, as he would be if you gave him his entire career, but a Hall of Famer, without a doubt. Same with Roger Clemens. Let's take away half his career. Oh, he's still a 4-time Cy Young winner, 3.5. He had 7. 6 All-Stars, a Triple Crown, a World Series, 3 ERA titles. And if you took away half his WAR, he'd still be at nearly 70 wins above replacement as a pitcher. Yeah, that's still a Hall of Famer, everybody. So if you took 50% of the career away from these two players, the headliners of the steroid era, the steroid boys, as I've called them, they are still no doubt Hall of Famers. And that's why I think they need to be voted in. Because you simply cannot tell the story of baseball without those two players. Now, I am 100% in agreement that Barry Bonds is not the home run king. Because steroids certainly helped him get 7 more home runs than Hank Aaron. And I'll always call Hank Aaron the home run king, Henry Aaron. He's the home run king to me. Always will be, until someone passes 755 in the modern era with no steroids. So we can take that title away from Barry Bonds. We can take away greatest pitcher of all time title away from Roger Clemens. Certainly. We can even put an asterisk next to their plaque in our mind. But not having them in the Hall of Fame and putting other guys who are under suspicion of steroids but never proven, who weren't nearly the same player, who if you took away 50% of their career, they wouldn't be in. It's just not fair. It's not equitable. It's not how I think this should be done. I'm hoping, and I'll agree with this, wait till the 10th year, then put them in. If that's hopefully what the baseball writers are doing, because both Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, about 15% of the votes short. They need 75% to get in. And they were both hovering around 60 this year. It started to plateau. I'm hoping that there's a large selection of these writers that are waiting for the 10th year to vote these guys in. Because I think they deserve to be Hall of Famers. They are massively influential to the history of the game. Their statistical profile is so overwhelming that even if you chopped off half of it, there's still no doubt Hall of Famers. And they played in an era where nearly everybody was doing it. And there are people who are under suspicion of doing steroids who are in the Hall of Fame. And there are players from the past who were known to have methods of cheating who are in the Hall of Fame. I just think they belong there. Not saying they're great dudes. Not saying what they did is something that should be done. But I'm saying if we want this Hall of Fame to be real, to be authentic, to be a true place to go and understand and appreciate the history of baseball and all its greatest players, I think Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens are necessary in that story. Necessary to be in the Hall of Fame. We'll go ahead and take a break. On the other side of the break, Luis Rojas, great hire from the New York Mets. We'll dive into that hire and why I like it so much on the other side of the break. You're listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Big welcome back into the GSMC Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Lukas Moore. We just dove into the steroid boys. We went through the Hall of Fame stuff. It's a conversation we have every year at this point. Congrats, Derek Jeter. Congrats, Larry Walker. Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds. I think that they'll get in the 10th year. Hopefully, they'll get in the 10th year because the Hall of Fame without those two is no Hall of Fame at all, at least in my opinion. Let's dive into Luis Rojas. New hire by the New York Mets. Obviously, Carlos Beltran, a victim of this large cheating scandal. Mets needed to find a new manager. They hired a guy who is the son of Felipe Alou, relative of Moises Alou. Obviously, not same last name. That was a weird story about immigration and then a last name being changed. It's really interesting. Check out MLB.com. They'll have that story. But Luis Rojas is, to me, the exact type of guy you need to be a manager, that you want to be a manager in modern baseball. So what I'm looking for in a manager is a guy who can understand analytics, who's able to take in that information, to understand its value and its place in the game, but also a guy who understands baseball and locker rooms. I worked for a summer collegiate baseball team with a manager who's had a lot of success, who has won a lot of games and developed a lot of players who have been drafted high in the MLB draft, who are working their way through the minor leagues. And he taught me the importance of a bus and understanding your place within that bus and understanding how to manage guys and how to manipulate personalities. And you can see in the lower levels of baseball how important that is to a team and how they play and knowing when to push the right buttons. And some people are just naturally good at this skill. Others have to learn it over time. Others, like Luis Rojas, were introduced to this skill or to this idea of pushing the right buttons in a locker room, of being a part of a baseball team, which is one of the most unique locker rooms and unique situations in all of sports because of the length of the season, because you're coming to work every day, because it does get boring in a 162-game stretch. It gets boring in a 42-game stretch. 72-game stretch. It does get boring. It does get hard to play. It's hard to show up every day. No NFL players struggling to show up for a Week 11 primetime game once a week, okay? It's difficult in baseball. It's a very unique locker room setting. Luis Rojas also has that background of having relatives who played in the major leagues. He spent 13 years in the minor league system of the New York Mets. He's very familiar with this organization, very familiar with a lot of the young players that have crawled their way through the Mets system. And he's highly tied into analytics. He's the perfect balance. He's younger too, only 38, turning 39 years old. This means he can connect to the younger generation, which changes more by the year. 18-year-olds are way different than 20-year-olds. It's a vast difference. It's a bigger difference than any time in history because of technology. Technology is causing information to spread faster, which causes trends to move faster, which causes ideas and ways of thinking and attitudes to move faster than they've ever before. So having younger managers, younger coaches is much more important than it's ever been to be able to connect to a locker room, especially in the sport of baseball, where you're not really outside of making the lineup and deciding whether to bunt in the 7th, 8th inning, which most of the time is decided by a computer that's running analytics on the situation about what you should do. Outside of that, there aren't really decisions to be made. There isn't play calling. There isn't game plans or schemes. Do we run cover 2? Do we start the high screen and roll? How many timeouts do I have? All that's thrown out the window. It's about managing personalities. It's about getting guys motivated to play. It's about understanding when a guy is having some trouble at home with his significant other, how to get him out of a rut, how to get him back in the game, how to help a young player who's struggling at the plate with a certain pitch, maybe giving him a tip or advice or knowing how to say just the right thing to change his mentality. It's unbelievably important, that skill in being a baseball manager. And I can't tell you 100% certain that Luis Rojas has that skill for the New York Mets, but I'm pretty sure he does. You know, when you have a dad that played, when you have an uncle that played, when you're around the game as much as he has been, when you climbed your way through the organization like he has, you're usually going to have that feel. Now, how great is he going to be at it? Well, we'll see how successful the Mets are over the next few years. But this is the correct hire for the Mets. They didn't need to go outside. They didn't need to bring in an outside personality. He was in consideration for the manager role before it was given to Carlos Beltran. I think he's a perfect fit for the modern major league manager who's becoming more of a manager of personalities than a decision maker in today's game. And that role is still highly important. Like, try it out. Try to throw out a team who just has a computer, process analytics, matchups, make out the lineup, and have that team just play, right? Because guys could play baseball, right? If a computer just gave a coach information and another player, just pretend there weren't any coaches, and players just looked at a screen and they were supposed to listen to this screen, and the screen told them when to shift, and the screen told them when to bunt, and the screen told them what's a great pitch to throw here, and then players communicated to players. You could certainly execute that and it would run by the analytics. But you need a manager. You need a guy that's there to manage the personalities. To, again, like I said, understand when a guy is struggling in his personal life, at the plate, in the field, understanding what button needs to be pushed. Dusty Baker was incredible at this, especially with the Reds teams. He knew exactly the right buttons to push when to get some really flamboyant personalities on their role, on their rhythm. He elevated players, made them better, made teams better, made them more consistent. That's what you're looking for in managers. But you're also looking for a guy who isn't going to throw the analytics out the window in the 8th inning just because he has a feeling that a slap bunt down the third base line is the right move right now. Because that is a big no-no too. You'll lose games that way. And every game is important in Major League Baseball, even though there's 162 of them. So you need a guy that is balanced, that understands analytics, but isn't beholden to them either. That understands personalities and understands the very fragile nature of baseball locker rooms. There's a lot of weird personalities. There's a lot of weird backgrounds. Right? Some guys were great high school quarterbacks, and then they decided to be a pitcher. Some guys have just been pitchers and have been weird their whole life. Hitters are completely... Baseball is the weirdest game. It's the weirdest collection of people that are in a locker room. And I've been around quite a few of them. It's just a weird thing. It's a hard thing to manage. And it's a special skill to be able to manage it. And somebody that's been around it for as long as Luis Rojas has been will be able to manage it. Great decision by the Mets. I like the hire. And I think that it'll be positive for them moving forward. Are they a playoff team? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. And we'll dive into that all through the month of March, heading through spring training. But Luis Rojas, the new manager of the New York Mets, hired. Great move by the other team in New York, making headlines on the same day Derek Jeter headed into the Hall of Fame. I think that's a solid move by the Mets, trying to take some of the shine, Derek Jeter, at least from a PR standpoint. Good time to announce that. On the other side of the break, Marcell Ozuna is joining the Atlanta Braves. The Braves, one of the more exciting young lineups in baseball last year. They've added another power bat, and they will be very dangerous in the National League East this season. We'll talk about that move on the other side of the break. You're listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Big welcome back into the GSMC Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Lukas Moore. Follow us on Twitter at GSMC_baseball. We talked about Marcell Ozuna. Well, we're going to talk about Marcell Ozuna. We talked about Luis Rojas before the break, the new manager of the New York Mets. But let's talk about Ozuna, the newest player for the Atlanta Braves. 1 year, $18 million for Ozuna, and he fits into this Atlanta Braves team, who is one of the more younger, exciting, surprising teams in Major League Baseball last season. I loved watching the Atlanta Braves. They were so fun, exciting, a lot of great young players on that roster. They come out of nowhere and they win the NL East. 97 wins. They lost to the St. Louis Cardinals in the divisional round, yes, but they're young. And they add Marcell Ozuna, who right now, age 29. So he's a veteran on this team out of the Dominican Republic. And Marcell Ozuna last year, 29 home runs, 241 batter, 89 RBIs, but above 100 OPS, gets on base at a solid clip. He's a guy that's going to fit well in this lineup. He adds power. He's an all-star. He adds some experience. He was on the team that beat the Braves in the playoffs a year ago. I think he'll really help this team. It's like one of those moves, you remember when the 2012 Reds added Scott Rowland, or a team adds a veteran, and that veteran, whether they be 29, 31, 33, but a guy who has experience winning, who's been in a winning locker room, comes into a really young, hot, talented team and helps them out. Also, it's going to help the Braves in case of injuries throughout the middle of their lineup. I think Ozuna was a great addition. A guy who's hit 20 home runs in 4 straight seasons, had 37 in 2017 for Miami when he was an all-star, solid contributor for the St. Louis Cardinals. Good addition to the Atlanta Braves lineup from a year ago, which had a lot of great players. Freddie Freeman, Ozzie Albies, Acuna, awesome. 41 home runs, 101 RBIs a year ago. They will be a fun team to watch. Fun team in the National League East. I think they're the favorites to win the NL East again, and I expect them to go a little farther in the playoffs this year. They have that year of experience. I'm excited to watch the Atlanta Braves heading into 2020. Marcell Ozuna added by the Braves. Great move from Atlanta. That's really all I had to say about that. We wanted to get the topic in. It was breaking news. We get very few free agent signings this time of year. But Ozuna, a great add. Now, I wanted to mention Nolan Arenado. What on earth is happening with the Colorado Rockies? Arenado calling out the front office. Does he want out after signing a big new deal? Are they going to be able to trade him? Who is the trade partner? Well, Ozuna walking from the Cardinals and heading to the Braves. Cardinals have been involved in those Arenado sweepstakes. Could be an interesting place to see Nolan Arenado land. Not if you're the rest of the NL Central. That division's up for grabs. You have the Reds, who are going to fall anywhere between, most projections say, 81 to 95 wins, probably around 85, 87. About everybody else in the division there too, except the Pirates. Brewers could win 90 games. Cardinals could win 90 games. Cubs, they still have talent. They could win 90 games. The Cardinals adding a player like him would be a real game changer for the playoff picture in the National League. And maybe letting Ozuna go. Although they probably planned on doing that, but maybe it's even more of an indication that Arenado is heading to St. Louis. A lot of fun, hot stove rumors still flying around throughout February and into spring training. Can't wait for spring training to get started. It's going to run up on us through the month of February. It'll be here before you know it. And the Astros apology will be here with the arrival of spring training. We talk about their lack of an apology, how that was a bit upsetting for baseball fans and Astros fans, and whether they should apologize for the cheating scandal on the other side of the break. You're listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Big welcome back into the GSMC Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Lucas Moore. Today we've talked Hall of Fame, Derek Jeter, Marcell Ozuna headed to the Atlanta Braves, a great move. Luis Rojas, the newest manager of the New York Mets. Oh, I think that's a great move. And all moves look great, I guess, in the month of January. But I really do like the Ozuna ad. I think he's a solid player with a good OPS, going to fit well in that lineup. Won't have to start every game, play 130 to 150. And I love Rojas because I think he's the perfect balance for what you need in a modern manager. He has youth, yet he has experience. He understands major league locker rooms, yet he's connected to analytics. He's the perfect combination of old school and new school that I think is going to be the modern manager moving forward in Major League Baseball. But I wanted to talk about the Houston Astros. Obviously, Jose Altuve, Alex Bregman, the two headlining players of this entire cheating scandal. Were there buzzers underneath the jerseys? Probably not, but maybe. There were certainly video monitors in the dugout. Managers got fired, fines laid down, draft picks taken away, largest scandal in Major League Baseball since the steroid era, since that was tried in front of the United States government. It's been a mess for the Houston Astros. It's been a mess for Major League Baseball. On the last show, I talked about how I didn't think this was much of an advantage for the Houston Astros, this cheating scandal, and how I think they probably would have won the World Series without it. But I understand why people are upset, and it's something that shouldn't be done. I just think that it's something that is pervasive throughout Major League Baseball and needs cleaned up by Major League Baseball, and I don't necessarily fault all these teams. And I'm certainly not going to fault Alex Bregman or Jose Altuve for trying to gain an advantage, for trying to be better players. That's what makes them great players. They're always looking for the best way to get better, right? Why does Tom Brady care so much about the PSI of his football? We remember Deflategate has to be between 12 PSI or 14 PSI, but Tom really liked it at 11.5. The reason he really liked it at 11.5 is because he had the dedication to every single detail of his game, and he knew he wanted 11.5. That dedication and detail goes into film study, goes into practice, goes into diet, goes into nutrition. It's like the poison of being great. You're so focused on being great that you'll even break the rules to be great. But breaking the rules and getting every advantage you can, is that attitude is probably what made them great to begin with. Again, it's not an excuse for cheating. It's not something that should be done. You should play within the rules. But these leagues have to do a better job of enforcing these rules to keep these ultra competitive people inside their rules, so that only the competitiveness, it's only reflected in their work ethic, in their film study, in their body preparation, in their diet, instead of, oh, we need to find a video monitor. We need to find a way around this. We need to find a way to cheat better. I think that that's where the focus needs to lie. It needs to lie more in the league instead of these individual players, because these individual players are just trying to feed their family or trying to get every advantage. And I was at that point and I was ready to just say, hey, Alex, hey, Jose, you know, you're great players. You're still going to be great players. You didn't need to do that, I don't think, to be successful. You'll see that this year when you won't have it because Major League Baseball has cracked down on it, and they'll be very, very aware of it, and everybody will be looking for it. And I think you'll still be great. And I think the Astros will still win the AL West. And I think Jose Altuve and Alex Bregman will still be great players. But you get a little upset at them when you hear Bregman come out with the I plead the fifth 5 times when he's asked about the cheating scandal. And Jose Altuve says nothing but, oh, we'll be back in the World Series this year. We'll be back in the World Series this year. I don't know what public relations manager for the Astros told them not to apologize, but I think you should have. You've already been punished. It's already been shown that it is true what happened, at least in some way. You don't even have to go into details and apologize for anything specific. You don't even have to admit your own fault. You can even say, I'm sorry for the way this played out. I apologize. I don't even know. There's definitely a better way to say it. But the word apology, the word I'm sorry, the word I wish we would have done better, I wish we would have known better than to do what we did. And then add in, but 11 other teams were doing it. We didn't need it. Anything like that would have been suffice. Because you're not on trial. The trial's over. You've lost. You cheated. You got caught. You needed to apologize. And hearing Alex Bregman plead the fifth 5 straight times to 5 different questions, you're just like, do you guys think you didn't cheat? Do you think that you're still on trial? Do you want to try to spin this in some way? It just felt really dishonest. It felt really out of place for 2 great guys and great players, guys who've positively influenced the Houston community and Major League Baseball immensely since they've joined, since the Astros have started all this success through 2017 and beyond. But thankfully, the Houston Astros organization said that when spring training commences, the players will get together and will issue an apology. So maybe this was a directive from the Houston Astros. Hey, don't apologize yet. We're going to come up with a statement. We'll figure out the best way to present this. Just a bad headline for the Houston Astros, the inability to apologize in that moment from their star players. It's a nitpicky thing, right? It's something that when you get caught doing something and you are 100% caught, you are dead to rights, the trial is over, right? If you rob a liquor store and at the end of it all, you're caught, you're on video, it's there. Just give an apology to the judge, maybe. Yeah, I probably shouldn't have done what I did. I know I made mistakes. I'll serve the time. I did the crime, but I wish I would have done better. Apologies don't matter in terms of reality. Apologies never really change anything that happened, never really change the consequences for something that happened, never really change what you did, doesn't make it less impactful. But they do matter to human emotion, to how you feel, to how you perceive something. It gives you a better taste in your mouth. And the Astros right now need to be feeding people candy in terms of the taste in their mouths. They need to be walking the line and trying to win this PR battle and show that they're good dudes, because they are good dudes, to show that they do have integrity, that they are great baseball players, and they love the game of baseball. They were just trying to get an edge in a way that people have been trying to get an edge for 50-odd years. There's so many great players and great managers who have been respected throughout time, who certainly cheated, who just never got caught. And that's okay. It's not okay you cheated. It's okay you got caught. Just apologize for it, and maybe we can move on. And hopefully they'll have a really succinct apology at the end of spring training. I think that's what a lot of baseball wants to see, because we'd all like to move on from this. I really don't want to be talking about this come April. And if this apology doesn't go well at the beginning of spring training, it's something that will be talked about throughout April. And I'm hopefully Houston starts the season hot, because if they start the season 12-20, oh boy, we're going to be hearing about it. And it's something that's probably not good for the game of baseball. That'll do it for our show. We appreciate you so much for listening. Give us a follow on Twitter at GSMC_baseball. And remember, coaches, players, people involved in youth sports and baseball, look at Derek Jeter. Look at him as the example of how to play this game. And understand that this game is not necessarily about being a great athlete or being smooth or looking good or wearing an Evo shield. It's about how you play. It's about being a ball player. And Derek Jeter represented that, I think, possibly better than any baseball player in history. But thank you so much for listening. This has been the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network, the home of so many great podcasts. You need to check them out. Please check them out. You'll have a lot of fun doing it. I'm Lukas Moore, and we'll see you next time. This has been the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.